They didn't mention anything about 6 cuts. And in fact, if you were there, or many reporters were, that they didn't even talk about eliminating the captain's position either. But what we found out after the budget, after we had the budget meeting, that without knowledge to me, they removed 6 dispatch positions and they removed the captain's position. So when Captain Beck was getting ready to retire, when we were looking to somehow fill that spot, I was told the funding was removed, and also we found out in a meeting that 6 dispatch positions removed as well, and they had this plan of consolidating dispatch, with the communication system. Now, I know a lot about communication. I sat down in 2003 and designed how it would work. Right now, it's what it was for a redundant system, not necessarily one that would take over take over completely for another dispatch position. Because what happens is you're going to, everything fails, and the plan they have now, I don't have a comfort zone with that. Probably about 5 years from now, if they had all the assets in place, if everything was in place the way it was designed to be, I wouldn't have that much of a problem with it, and those things would, of course, those positions would probably be eliminated by attrition. What they decide to do is very shortly is they're going to turn the switch off in 2 dispatch centers, and turn the switch on for those consoles and for that dispatch responsibility into Pahrump alone. So I don't like the plan. If you can't do this without some type of a testing. When we moved back in the old country, we moved from one dispatch location to another, to a brand new dispatch center. We were still operating the same radios. We're only a 15 square mile, jurisdiction, and they still did months of testing, making sure, and they pushed the system to its limits, making sure there wasn't going to be any kind of catastrophic failure, and if there's any weaknesses in the system, making sure there's assets in place to do that. They haven't done that. They haven't pulled the system, they had testing it, and in a very short period of time, about a month, is that we're going to be dispatching for 2 locations without all the necessary assets in place, which should be in place before that to occur. I mean, the system was built out to year 2020, where they would have all the microwave systems in place and so on and so forth, because they need the additional assets in place to do that. And Tonopah actually took over for 911 when 911 in Pahrump failed. Yeah. Not too long ago. So if we have a failure, and there's no one in another dispatch center to take that load, that workload, I don't know what's going to happen. I know that we can't. And we were fretting when we had that communication breakdown with the telephones, if there was any unanswered 911 calls. But if they do this without having, the plan they're doing is not. If anybody's looking to do something like this in other jurisdictions, they would have months of testing. In fact, when they talked about this, what they were going to do is I told them you'd have to have at least 6 months of testing and pushing the system to failure, and then having drills to make sure that if something happened, how would you take that workload? Especially now you're talking about closing dispatch centers, and if anything happened at 2 o'clock in the middle of the night in Pahrump, and 911 fails. How are you going to switch the system over to another dispatch center which is closed?
So the Nye County Dispatch Center here in Pahrump will be handling all the Tonopah calls. What about Beatty? Beatty too as well.
Yeah, Beatty as well. And then the problem is that you have repeater stations in different areas. So in order to communicate with a deputy in those areas, you have to switch to that repeater. The system. When I looked at this back into, looking at how we were going to manage the communications in Nye County for the future, there was a plan. I remember like a year and a half ago, wasn't this same dispatch, I was being scolded by the previous IT person, the system is a failure. Well, it wasn't. The problem was they pulled back funding in order to move us into the digital world, which is what we should be heading into, is the digital world, which is great. The problem is that they're pushing the system they're pushing they're pushing a lot of the capabilities onto Pahrump without having all the assets in place. But the most important thing is they're not testing the system. It should take a couple months before testing the system. Then pushing the system to failure, and when the system fails, have drills in case of system failure, and how we can get push those phone calls to another location that's manned.
How many dispatchers do you have right now within Nye County?
Well, the number varies now. We're looking at different positions, but they cut 6. I mean, they're looking at cutting public safety.
How many are going to be left over?
Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going to come out of this budget. I mean, listen, Deanna, to be perfectly honest, they do budget hearings, but with the outcome of budget hearings, they don't let me know the final outcome. All I know is that I go to these meetings saying this is what we need for public safety. I was elected by the people for public safety. I know what I'm doing. You have individuals that don't know anything about 24/7 operation. They say they do. They don't know about public safety, but say they do. I think if they watch TV, I think that's what their public safety thing is. They talk about the health, safety, and welfare of the county. But what happens is that there's nothing done in the open. And if you hear my ire, I'm really mad about this. And when you get a meeting several months into your budget, they tell you, well, we cut 6 dispatch positions, we take one your captain's position, and that's the end of it. When they don't discuss that with elected officials, the people that are in charge and know what they're doing, then that to me is a failure of government that claims to be transparent. They're not transparent. I mean, muddy water is more transparent than sometimes I see in county government. So I'm just upset because we're not talking about road that someone wants paved, we can't do it because of a budget and we have to wait till next year. We're not looking at someone if someone's trying to call the recorder's office and can't get through for some paperwork. What we're saying is that if a phone call is missed, someone's life is in danger. A lot of cell phone calls that are 911 calls come in under a regular phone line. And they just don't seem to understand it, and they do these things behind your back.
Where do the Nye County Commissioners get recommendations for things like law enforcement? Who would they normally go to who is a professional to get the recommendation to cut a dispatch?
Well, I don't know. To cut dispatch, they should look into it. They should look at it doing it very slowly. You just can't turn the switch off from one location to someone else. I hope and pray nothing happens. But if the system fails, and the system's not tested, and there's no drills to decide how these unanswered phone calls are going to happen if the 911 fails or phone system fails in Pahrump, and how those phone systems are going to be handled someplace else. If they don't have a plan for that, and they say they do, but they haven't discussed it with me. And understand this, when they talk about law enforcement professional, I am the law enforcement professional. 40 years, I have a very good reputation in Jersey City. I helped them with a lot of the things to address a lot of the concerns they had in Jersey City. I was elected by the people of Nye County 3 times as their law enforcement representative in the sheriff's office. We have reduced crime. We have, done a lot of things that the county now is working on to improve. But those things were started with plans that were established by the Nye County Sheriff's Office and public safety. But cutting just 6 dispatch positions within 1 year, and then within several months, and all of a sudden turning the switch on to another location without testing the system, having several months of testing a system, to me is irresponsible, and to me is a highly litigious situation. I hope the system doesn't fail, because there's people's lives that are on the line. But if it does, there's people's lives that are on the line, and that's what I'm very upset about, because of we're responsible. We're going to make this, the Nye County Sheriff's Office, we're a professional organization. We're going to work in every way possible making sure that this plan they have succeeds. But they keep talking about a plan. I haven't seen anything from the plan. And
this is happening May 1st.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we were told, several weeks ago they're going to have this happen. I do a lot of praying on this one because of the responsibility I have as the sheriff of public safety responsibility I have for the citizens of Nye County. It's not the county commissioners that are going to be calling 2 o'clock in the morning when they need help. It's Nye County Sheriff's Office. And like I said, is that there's a lot of parts about the system that are not yet complete, and they're pushing this effort to do this when I think right now it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible to have meetings that I don't sit in on. It's very irresponsible to have promises from a phone company that when we had the same types of guarantees, when the phone system had problems, it failed, dramatically failed, was a catastrophic failure, and Tonopah was answering 911 for Pahrump. What happens 2 o'clock in the morning when there's no one there and we can't switch over to another dispatch location? Or we have to now call somebody up at 2 o'clock in the morning to all of a sudden sit up to get there. There's a delay. We don't know when emergencies happen. They think they can schedule things out. They're mistaken.